and that became as big a problem as the 30-30.
Back in 1988, nobody in Hollywood believed in Bull Durham. Studios passed on it, the budget was tiny, and even some of the cast almost never made it into the film. But decades later, the movie is still being called one of the greatest baseball films ever made. Now Kevin Costner is pulling back the curtain on the moments fans completely missed. The behind-the-scenes tension, the hidden details buried inside scenes, and the reason one unforgettable exchange may have left a young actor in tears. Turns out, there was way more going on behind the dugout than anybody realized. Kevin Costner, before the fame born in California. In 1955, Kevin Costner grew up in a household that was always trying to stay afloat financially, even if he didn't fully realize it at the time. His mother worked as a welfare worker, while his father earned a living as an electric line servicer. Money was tight, but to young Kevin, life still felt rich in all the ways that mattered. As a kid, he honestly believed he had the perfect childhood. He thought his backyard was huge, his life was normal, and his family had everything they needed. It wasn't until he visited other kids' homes and saw things like swimming pools that he slowly started realizing his family didn't have much money at all. But by then, those material differences didn't seem nearly as important as the kind of home he had grown up in. What the Costners lacked financially, they made up for with closeness. His parents showed up for him constantly. They attended his games, stayed involved in his life, and made family the center of everything. That support became one of the strongest foundations he carried into adulthood. Long before fame, movie sets, and awards entered the picture, Costner's roots were built around loyalty, presence, and togetherness. Back then, acting wasn't even something he seriously considered. Sports completely dominated his world. School never felt like a natural fit for him, so he poured his energy into competition instead. Basketball, baseball, football. If there was a game happening, Kevin wanted to be part of it. Like a lot of kids growing up in that era, he stayed outside playing until the street lights flicked on and told everybody it was time to head home. But sports gave him more than just a way to pass the time. They shaped the way he looked at life. He learned to respect competition itself, not just winning. What mattered most to him was playing well, pushing himself, and earning results the hard way. That mindset, steady effort, discipline, and toughness would eventually follow him straight into Hollywood. At the same time, another obsession was quietly taking root in his imagination: the American West. Everything changed when he was just 7 years old and saw how the West was won at the famous Cinerama Dome in Hollywood. One image from that movie stayed burned into his memory forever. Jimmy Stewart gliding across a perfectly still lake in a birch bark canoe looked almost unreal to him, like another world entirely. Watching that scene, young Kevin suddenly felt connected to something bigger than himself. Then came another moment that pulled him in even deeper. Stewart's character reached the shoreline and encountered a group of rugged frontier figures who looked mysterious and adventurous to the young boy sitting in the theater. Costner became fascinated by that world instantly. He didn't just admire it from a distance. He wanted to step inside it. That fascination grew into a full-blown obsession. While most kids were simply watching westerns, Costner was trying to recreate the frontier lifestyle himself. Between childhood and his late teens, he actually built 3 canoes by hand. In his mind, he wasn't just playing around outdoors. He was chasing the feeling of an untouched America, a version of the country that seemed wild, peaceful, and full of possibility. Ironically, even with his deep love for the Old West, Costner never became someone who loved every Western film ever made. He later admitted that only a small handful of movies from his childhood truly shaped him artistically. Those few stories simply hit differently and stayed with him. Even then, acting still wasn't a clear career path. Costner enjoyed performing when he was younger, but it wasn't until 1978, at 23 years old, that the idea of becoming an actor seriously entered his mind. And strangely enough, the turning point came during a random flight while he was traveling on his honeymoon with his first wife, Cindy Silva. On that flight sat legendary actor Richard Burton. Burton had reportedly bought several seats around himself so nobody would sit nearby. To most passengers, that probably made him look untouchable, but Costner was already wrestling internally with whether he should take a chance on acting, so seeing a giant like Burton right there in front of him felt almost symbolic. Eventually, he gathered enough courage to approach him. The conversation itself was brief and private, but it stayed with Costner. Then, sometime later at the airport, Burton spotted him again while he was waiting for a bus. The legendary actor walked over and quietly wished him good luck before leaving. For Costner, that small moment landed hard. It felt less like casual politeness and more like permission to believe in himself. Still, he didn't suddenly become a movie star overnight. There was no instant breakthrough, no dramatic Hollywood success story waiting around the corner. Instead, he entered the industry quietly, taking a job as a stage manager at Raleigh Studios in Hollywood. He kept his ambitions mostly to himself. Costner understood that Hollywood was full of people desperately chasing fame, and he didn't want to come across as another struggling dreamer begging for attention. So he stayed observant, worked hard, and watched everything carefully from the sidelines. The setback that changed everything. In the early 1980s, Kevin Costner was mostly picking up small parts in movies like Malibu Hot Summer, Night Shift, and Table for Five. He was still trying to figure out where he fit in Hollywood, grinding through auditions and minor appearances while bigger stars dominated the spotlight. Then, in 1982, it finally looked like his big moment had arrived. Costner landed a role in The Big Chill, a movie packed with rising stars and major acting talent, including Glenn Close, Jeff Goldblum, Tom Berenger, and William Hurt. On paper, it should have been the breakthrough that changed everything for him. There was just one problem. By the time the movie hit theaters, Kevin Costner had been completely cut out of it. For a young actor trying to break into Hollywood, that kind of setback could have been crushing. Imagine thinking you finally made it, only to disappear from the finished film entirely. But strangely enough, that disappointment ended up becoming one of the most important moments of his career. While audiences never saw him in The Big Chill, director Lawrence Kasdan saw something in him during the filming process. Costner proved himself professional, focused, and easy to work with. More importantly, he built a relationship with Kasdan that would completely change the direction of his future. Not long afterward, Kasdan cast him in Silverado, the Western that finally put Costner on Hollywood's radar in a major way. And once that door opened, it was like everything suddenly clicked into place. One hit followed another. First came The Untouchables, where Costner held his own alongside legends like Sean Connery and Robert De Niro in the gritty world of Prohibition-era crime. Then came Field of Dreams, the emotional baseball fantasy that eventually became one of the most beloved sports movies ever made. But the real turning point came with Dances with Wolves. By 1990, Costner had already become a major movie star, but taking on Dances with Wolves was a completely different level of risk. The Civil War-era epic was ambitious, emotional, and deeply personal to him. The problem was that nobody else seemed to believe in it. Costner first tried handing the project to several respected directors, hoping one of them would bring the story to life. Instead, they either turned it down completely or wanted to heavily reshape the script. Eventually, Costner realized the only way the movie would get made the way he envisioned it was if he directed it himself. So, almost by necessity, he stepped behind the camera for the very first time. He didn't approach the project like someone convinced he was the greatest filmmaker in the room. In fact, he openly admitted he didn't think he was as experienced or talented as many established directors. But what he did have was belief in the story. He trusted his instincts and refused to compromise on the things that mattered to him. That gamble paid off in a massive way. Dances with Wolves became a phenomenon. Audiences connected with its sweeping landscapes, emotional storytelling, and respectful portrayal of Native American culture in a way Hollywood rarely attempted at the time. The movie dominated the Academy Awards, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Director for Costner himself. Almost overnight, he went from movie star to one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood. And he didn't slow down after that. He followed up with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, then the politically charged drama JFK, before stepping into what would become one of the defining films of the 1990s, The Bodyguard. At first glance, Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston seemed like two stars from completely different worlds. Costner was the rugged Hollywood leading man known for westerns and dramatic films, while Whitney was one of the biggest music superstars on the planet. But once they came together for The Bodyguard in 1992, they formed a connection that audiences instantly felt. In the film, Costner played Frank Farmer, a hardened professional bodyguard assigned to protect Rachel Marron, a global music icon played by Whitney Houston. While Costner already had years of acting experience under his belt, this was actually Whitney's first movie role, and from the very beginning, Costner believed she was the only person who could play it. He pushed hard for her casting, even when the production faced delays. At one point, filming was reportedly postponed for an entire year while waiting for Whitney to commit to the project. Costner never wavered. He believed her presence would make the film special, and he refused to move forward without her. Not everyone in Hollywood supported that decision. Costner later revealed that some people in the industry were uncomfortable with the idea of a black woman being cast as his romantic lead. But he stood firm, ignoring the criticism and insisting Whitney was the right choice for the role. That decision ended up becoming one of the biggest reasons the movie worked so well. The chemistry between Costner and Houston practically jumped off the screen. Audiences connected deeply with the tension, vulnerability, and emotional pull between Frank Farmer and Rachel Marron. Over the years, many fans became convinced there had to be something deeper happening behind the scenes because their connection felt so natural. Costner believed a lot of that spark came directly from Lawrence Kasdan's writing. The script gave the characters a sharp, emotionally layered relationship filled with tension, humor, and quiet intimacy. But even beyond the screenplay, Costner saw something undeniably magnetic in Whitney herself. Long before filming even started, he recognized her star power immediately. To him, she carried a rare kind of presence that couldn't really be taught. She had beauty, confidence, vulnerability, and one of the most unforgettable voices in music history, all wrapped into one person. As filming continued, the admiration between the two stars became obvious. They shared deep respect for each other, both professionally and personally, and that closeness only fueled speculation about their relationship off-screen. Rumors eventually spread that the connection between them during filming felt immediate and intense. Whether those stories were true or not, one thing was undeniable. Together, Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston created a film romance that audiences still remember decades later. How everything fell apart. By this time, Kevin Costner looked completely untouchable in Hollywood. After the massive success of Dances with Wolves, he wasn't just another movie star anymore. He had become one of the most powerful names in the industry. Winning 2 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Picture, seemed to confirm that Costner could do no wrong. At that moment, it honestly felt like he had everything figured out. But Hollywood has a way of changing fast. Just a few years later, Costner found himself at the center of one of the biggest disasters of the decade, Waterworld. When the film went into production, it was supposed to be a groundbreaking blockbuster. Costner not only starred in it, but also helped produce it, betting heavily on the ambitious post-apocalyptic adventure. The problem was that the movie quickly spiraled out of control. The production became infamous almost immediately. Filming on open water created constant problems, from dangerous weather conditions to destroyed sets and endless delays. Costs kept climbing higher and higher until the budget ballooned to an unbelievable $175 million, making it one of the most expensive movies ever made at the time. Then came the real blow. When Waterworld finally hit theaters in 1995, critics tore it apart, and financially, it became a nightmare. Reports later estimated the film lost over $100 million. Suddenly, the man who had once looked like Hollywood's golden child was being blamed for one of the industry's most notorious flops. And the damage wasn't just professional. Rumors spread that Costner had personally invested around $22 million of his own money into the project, meaning the failure reportedly hit his wallet just as hard as it hit his reputation. What made the situation even more frustrating was the fact that some people had tried to warn him beforehand. According to screenwriter Peter Rader, Steven Spielberg himself strongly advised against filming on real water. Spielberg already knew firsthand how difficult ocean shoots could become after making Jaws years earlier. He reportedly warned that the decision would create endless technical problems and skyrocket production costs. But Costner pushed forward anyway. The result was a grueling production that became legendary in Hollywood for all the wrong reasons. Cast and crew members dealt with brutal filming conditions, constant setbacks, and a chaotic atmosphere that seemed to get worse by the day. And while Waterworld was falling apart professionally, trouble was also building in Costner's personal life. His marriage to Cindy Silva had once seemed incredibly solid. The two first got together long before fame entered the picture, marrying back in 1978 when Costner was still just a young man chasing dreams. Cindy had been there through the struggle years, standing beside him as he slowly climbed his way through Hollywood. In the early days, Kevin was completely smitten with her. Friends and family could see it immediately. He admired everything about her: her intelligence, her kindness, and the way she grounded him. To him, Cindy represented stability during a time when his life was still uncertain. But by 1994, after 16 years of marriage and 3 children together, the relationship came to an end. The announcement shocked fans. From the outside, they had looked like one of Hollywood's more stable couples. In their public statement, the split appeared peaceful and respectful, with both sides agreeing they had resolved matters involving their children and finances amicably. Still, the tabloids immediately went into overdrive. Rumors of infidelity started circulating almost overnight. Stories linked Costner to several women, including a nightclub worker named Sherry Stewart. Then came even bigger rumors tied directly to the Waterworld production in Hawaii, where reports claimed he had become involved with a married woman during filming. Over time, many people began viewing the Hawaii shoot as the breaking point in the marriage. There were also reports that Cindy had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the romantic scenes Costner filmed throughout his career. As his fame grew, so did the pressure on their relationship. Hollywood constantly surrounded him with temptation, attention, and speculation, and maintaining a marriage under those conditions became incredibly difficult. Costner himself later admitted how dangerous that environment could be. He openly acknowledged that Hollywood placed enormous pressure on relationships and that even small mistakes could come with massive consequences. To him, marriage wasn't something simple. It required constant work, discipline, and sacrifice. Whether cheating directly caused the divorce was never fully confirmed, but many close to the situation believe the growing distance between them played a major role. Costner's career demanded long shoots, constant travel, and endless time away from home. Meanwhile, Cindy reportedly struggled with the image Hollywood had built around him as a romantic leading man. At one point, friends claimed Costner felt trapped between two worlds. On one side was his family life. On the other was the movie career that had made him one of the biggest stars in America. Eventually, the marriage collapsed under the weight of it all. Financially, the divorce became one of the most expensive celebrity separations ever at the time, reportedly costing Costner around $80 million, but the emotional toll seemed to hit even harder. Years later, he admitted the experience deeply shook him. More than anything, he struggled with the reality of no longer seeing his children every day. For a man who grew up valuing strong family bonds above almost everything else, that loss stayed with him. Unfortunately, the difficult period didn't stop there. As the 1990s continued, Costner's career became increasingly unstable. Several high-profile box office disappointments damaged his standing in Hollywood, and controversy seemed to follow him from project to project. The same industry that had once treated him like a guaranteed superstar now questioned whether he could still carry major films. By the early 2000s, Kevin Costner found himself in unfamiliar territory, fighting to rebuild both his reputation and his career after years of setbacks, failures, and personal heartbreak. The Kevin Costner meltdown. By 2018, Kevin Costner had already spent decades cementing himself as one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. But even after all those years, he was still about to step into one of the biggest roles of his entire career, John Dutton in Taylor Sheridan's Western drama Yellowstone. Ironically, Costner almost didn't do it. From the very beginning, he had serious doubts about joining the series. The biggest concern wasn't the script, the character, or even the long television commitment. it was his family. Costner reportedly worried that the demanding production schedule would pull him too far away from home and put strain on his marriage. And honestly, those fears weren't unfounded. Yellowstone filmed primarily in Utah and Montana, while Costner and his family were based in California. That meant long stretches away from home, constant travel, and months spent living on location. According to insiders, the conversations surrounding the project became incredibly serious before he finally agreed to sign on. Costner didn't want to make the decision alone. He reportedly spent months discussing it with his family, trying to figure out whether the opportunity was worth the sacrifice. At one point, there were even attempts to negotiate partial filming in California just to reduce the amount of time he'd spend away. But the production couldn't make it work. Even with all the warning signs staring him in the face, Costner ultimately took the role. And almost immediately, Yellowstone exploded. The series became a cultural phenomenon and one of Paramount's biggest hits ever. Suddenly, audiences everywhere were obsessed with the Dutton family, modern ranch life, and the brutal power struggles unfolding against the backdrop of the American West. Still, even Costner didn't fully see that level of success coming. He believed people would connect with the show, but he never expected it to become such a runaway sensation. Looking back later, he admitted he wasn't shocked that audiences loved it, but the sheer scale of the reaction caught even him off guard. Part of what made the series resonate so deeply, at least in Costner's eyes, was the world it captured. Yellowstone didn't just romanticize ranch life. It showed both the beauty and the brutality of it. The sweeping mountains, rivers, and open landscapes gave the show a cinematic feeling that audiences couldn't get enough of. At the same time, the story explored power, family loyalty, greed, and survival in a way that felt timeless. Costner took enormous pride in what the show became. To him, Yellowstone wasn't just another TV series. It felt like a modern Western epic that managed to reconnect people with a style of storytelling Hollywood had largely abandoned. But behind the scenes, things were getting complicated. After 5 hugely successful years on the show, fans were stunned in 2023 when news broke that Costner was leaving Yellowstone, and the way the story came out made the situation even messier. Details about his exit surfaced during a child support hearing tied to his divorce from Christine Baumgartner. During the proceedings, Costner revealed that the second half of the season had been split up partly because he needed time to focus on his own passion project, Horizon. According to Costner, he had even tried to negotiate staying involved beyond that point. He reportedly expressed interest in returning for another season, but talks eventually collapsed over scheduling, money, and creative disagreements. And that's where the situation really turned ugly. Reports quickly painted Costner as difficult and demanding. According to industry insiders, he desperately wanted to return to Yellowstone after his character's apparent exit because he hoped to give John Dutton a more satisfying ending. At the same time, some believed a Yellowstone return could also help generate positive attention for Horizon, his massive Western film project. But negotiations allegedly became tense. Rumors surfaced claiming Costner wanted a lighter shooting schedule, more money, and even approval over scripts. That reportedly didn't sit well with Taylor Sheridan, the creator and driving creative force behind Yellowstone. Sheridan was said to view the requests as overstepping, especially considering the show's success was built largely around his writing and vision. Costner, however, later pushed back hard against that narrative. In interviews, he argued that scheduling chaos on the production had become impossible to manage. According to him, Yellowstone repeatedly failed to stick to timelines, and by season 5, he simply couldn't continue rearranging his life around constant delays because Horizon demanded his full attention. Costner claimed he offered multiple scheduling solutions to help make things work, but progress stalled, scripts never arrived, and eventually he reached a point where he felt the only option left was for the show to write his character out entirely. As tensions surrounding the exit grew, more stories about behind-the-scenes conflict started leaking into public view. One of the biggest controversies involved a reported clash between Costner and co-star Wes Bentley. According to insiders, tempers flared during filming after Costner allegedly encouraged Bentley to ignore Taylor Sheridan's script and approach a scene differently. Bentley reportedly pushed back, reminding Costner that Sheridan, not Costner, was running the show. That disagreement apparently escalated fast. Sources claimed the confrontation became heated enough that the two actors got directly into each other's faces, exchanging angry words and even shoving each other before things calmed down. While the situation never turned physical beyond that, insiders described the moment as a major turning point for cast morale. Some reports claimed the incident deeply upset the rest of the cast and further strained Costner's relationship with the production team. Taylor Sheridan was reportedly furious about the situation, and the atmosphere on set allegedly shifted afterward. Bentley's representatives later confirmed that a confrontation did happen, though they insisted the two actors eventually moved past it. Even after Costner's departure, subtle tension still seemed to linger publicly. In later interviews, some cast members hinted that filming became noticeably less stressful once he left the show, fueling even more speculation about behind-the-scenes drama. But Costner refused to quietly accept the criticism. When discussing the fallout later on, he openly admitted he felt attacked and unfairly blamed for much of the chaos surrounding Yellowstone. From his perspective, a lot of the negative stories coming out about him weren't entirely truthful. At the same time all this drama was unfolding, Costner had already gone all in on Horizon, the Western film saga he viewed as his ultimate passion project. And he wasn't just creatively invested in it, he was financially risking everything. Costner reportedly poured more than $50 million of his own money into the series, with a significant portion allegedly coming from mortgaging property he owned in California. It was the kind of gamble few actors would ever dare take, especially at that stage of their careers. But the risk didn't immediately pay off. The first Horizon film carried an enormous budget, but struggled badly at the box office, reportedly earning only a fraction of what it cost to make. Even though Costner pushed forward with the second installment, its release became uncertain, with the movie largely limited to festival screenings while the studio reconsidered its rollout strategy. Then came more controversy. In 2025, reports surfaced that United Costume Corporation had sued Costner's production company, claiming it was still owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid costume fees tied to the first two Horizon films. It was another difficult headline during an already turbulent chapter of his career. And perhaps the most ironic part of all was this. Despite spending years as one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars and living an undeniably lavish lifestyle, Costner eventually found himself publicly seeking wealthy investors to help finance the third Horizon movie. For Kevin Costner, the story of Horizon started to feel strangely familiar. A massive Western dream fueled by passion, ambition, personal risk, and the stubborn refusal to let go, no matter how complicated the road became. Kevin Costner reveals what fans never noticed on Bull Durham, 1988. Did you know that Bull Durham, now considered one of the greatest sports comedies ever made, almost never even stepped onto the field? It sounds unbelievable now, but when the movie was making the rounds in Hollywood back in the late 80s, every major studio passed on it. Nobody wanted to touch it. And yet somehow, this little baseball movie that nearly got buried ended up becoming one of the most beloved classics of its era. Released in 1988, the film followed Kevin Costner as Crash Davis, a worn-down Triple-A catcher assigned to mentor a reckless young pitching prospect played by Tim Robbins. On paper, it sounded simple, but to the people making it, there was something special hiding inside that script. Years later, while looking back on his career during a roll recall interview, Costner admitted he knew immediately the story had something rare. The problem was convincing anybody else. According to him, writer Ron Shelton took the script to every major studio in town, not once, but twice, and still got rejected across the board. Eventually, both men reached a point where they honestly believed the movie just wasn't going to happen. But instead of walking away, they pushed forward anyway. The film was eventually made on a tiny budget, somewhere between $6 and $9 million, depending on who tells the story. Either way, it was considered incredibly small for a studio movie. Nobody involved had any idea that this underdog baseball film would still be talked about nearly 4 decades later. And the uphill battle didn't stop with financing. Susan Sarandon, who would go on to become unforgettable as Annie Savoy, later revealed that Orion Pictures didn't want her for the role at all. In fact, she was reportedly dead last on their wish list. The actresses ahead of her kept refusing to audition though, and that unexpected opening gave her a shot. At the time, Sarandon was living in Italy, but she wanted the role badly enough to pay for her own flight to Los Angeles. She left her young child at home, flew across the ocean, read the entire script opposite Kevin Costner, then immediately turned around and flew back to Italy the same day. It was a complete whirlwind. But less than 24 hours later, the phone rang. The role was hers. For Costner, the movie was personal from the beginning because baseball had always been personal to him. Bull Durham would eventually become the first chapter in what fans now unofficially call his baseball trilogy, followed by Field of Dreams in 1989 and For the Love of the Game a decade later. And once filming started, Costner's love for the game spilled way beyond the cameras. Between takes, he reportedly turned the set into its own private competition. Whenever extras playing ball players took too big a lead off base, Costner would challenge them to steal on him. Then he raised the stakes. If the pitcher threw them out, maybe they'd lose their role in the movie. Suddenly, what started as downtime became a full-on side game. Extras poured out of the dugout trying their luck, only for Costner to gun most of them down from behind the plate. According to him, he threw out around 25 of 30 runners. Nobody ever confirmed whether anybody actually lost their job over it, but one story from the set became legendary. Internet lore claims Costner once reduced the film's young bat boy to tears during a scene. The kid delivered his line, "Get a hit, crash," and Costner, fully immersed in his grizzled veteran character, snapped back with a cold, "Shut up." Looking back years later, Costner joked that he wasn't trying to upset the kid. He was just committed to the role. To him, Bull Durham wasn't supposed to feel like some dreamy baseball fairy tale where the aging hero smiles warmly at the adorable bat boy. This movie lived in a rougher, more sarcastic world. The exchange wasn't meant to be sweet. It was meant to feel real. And if the kid really did cry afterward, Costner figured maybe the director simply forgot to warn him what line was coming next.